Some guitarists are legends the moment they hit the stage. Others become legends only after they're gone. Tommy Bolin was both, a player whose sound was so fluid, so inventive, that musicians from across genres sought him out. He played with jazz masters like Billy Cobham, rock giants like Deep Purple, and even fronted his own rising career as a solo artist. Yet his story ended at just 25 years old, silenced before the world could fully realize his potential. This is the story of Tommy Bolin, the guitar genius who burned too bright. From a small town in Iowa came a sound destined for the world's biggest stages. Tommy Bolin was born on August 1st, 1951 in Sioux City, Iowa. His heritage was as eclectic as his music, Swedish on his father's side and Syrian on his mother's side. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, no one could have guessed he'd one day share stages with some of the biggest names in rock. But by the time he was 10, music was already his world. His parents noticed early on that Tommy wasn't like other kids. While others were playing sports or chasing trouble, Tommy was glued to records, soaking in sounds from Elvis Presley to jazz guitarist Wes Montgomery. He got his first guitar as a teenager and never looked back. By high school, he was already in bands, first with Denny and the Triumphs, then with A Patch of Blue. His playing stood out not just for speed, but for tone, touch, and the sheer emotion he could pour into a single note. At 17, Tommy left home for Denver, chasing music full-time. It was a risky move, no money, no plan, just a guitar and ambition. But he knew one thing: he wasn't meant for Sioux City. He was meant for the world. A broken string of fate, opening for Led Zeppelin, put him on the map. Denver was the launching pad. In 1969, Tommy joined Zephyr, a blues rock band with powerhouse vocalist Candy Givens. Their self-titled debut album featured Tommy's fiery guitar, and though critics were lukewarm, live audiences saw the spark immediately. Zephyr wasn't just a local act, they landed gigs opening for legends, including Led Zeppelin. Tommy's style was impossible to ignore. He wasn't just copying Clapton or Page, he was blending blues, jazz, psychedelia, and sheer experimentation into something entirely his own. Fans who saw him in those years talk about solos that felt like journeys, shifting from delicate whispers to volcanic eruptions in seconds. But Zephyr never broke through nationally. Internal struggles, management issues, and Candy Givens' unpredictable performances held them back. Tommy was too ambitious to stay stuck. By 1971, he left the band, determined to find bigger stages.
Lord, I'm feeling kinda weak in the knees. Somebody help me if I fall down, please.
Replacing Joe Walsh, an impossible task, unless you're Tommy Bolin. Opportunity came calling in 1973. The James Gang, once fronted by Joe Walsh, needed a new guitarist. Walsh had left to form Barnstorm, and the band's future was uncertain. Enter Tommy Bolin. Bolin joined for the album Bang, released in 1973, and followed it up with Miami in 1974. His playing brought a fresh energy, less bluesy than Walsh, more experimental, more versatile. Songs like Standing in the Rain and Spanish Lover showed off his range, while his stage presence gave the band new life. Not all fans were convinced. Some diehards insisted the James Gang could never be the same without Walsh, but others saw Bolin as a revelation, a guitarist pushing boundaries instead of clinging to the past. Ultimately, the James Gang wasn't built to last without Walsh's identity, but for Tommy, it was a stepping stone, a chance to prove he could step into big shoes and still shine. One record turned him from a rock guitarist into a musician's musician. If James Gang showed Tommy could play rock, Billy Cobham's Spectrum proved he could play anything. Released in 1973, the jazz fusion masterpiece featured Cobham on drums, Jan Hammer on. Stepping into Ritchie Blackmore's shoes could have broken anyone, but Tommy rewrote the script. Then came the biggest break of all. In 1975, Ritchie Blackmore left Deep Purple, one of the biggest bands in the world at the time. To replace him, they needed someone extraordinary. They chose Tommy Bolin. Bolin joined for Come Taste the Band, an album that divided fans but showcased his versatility. Unlike Blackmore, Bolin wasn't interested in classical-inspired shredding. He infused funk, soul, and even jazz into Purple's heavy sound. Tracks like Gettin' Tighter and Dealer bore his unmistakable touch. But it's important to understand the bigger picture. Deep Purple were already in turmoil before Tommy arrived. Years of relentless touring, substance abuse, and internal conflicts had worn the band thin. Some fans resented anyone trying to fill Blackmore's shoes. Meanwhile, Tommy struggled with pressure, criticism, and his growing drug use. On stage, some nights he was brilliant, other nights he seemed lost. The inconsistency hurt the band, but the collapse of Deep Purple in 1976 was the result of many problems, not just Tommy. Still, Come Taste the Band has since been reappraised. Many now see it as an underrated gem, and Tommy's work on it as bold, fearless, and ahead of its time. For the first time, Tommy had no band to hide behind. It was all him. Even as Deep Purple unraveled, Tommy was carving out his own path. His first solo album, Teaser, 1975, was a showcase of everything he could do. Rockers like The Grind, ballads like People People, and the stunning Lotus revealed a guitarist and vocalist ready to be more than a sideman. The follow-up, Private Eyes, 1976, showed even greater promise. Songs like Bustin' Out for Rosie and Post Toasty blended funk, rock, and soul in ways few guitarists even attempted. Critics were impressed. Fans were starting to rally. It felt like Tommy Bolin was on the verge of a breakthrough. But behind the scenes, the drugs were taking hold. Friends and bandmates worried. Tommy was chasing success, but also running from demons he couldn't control. His final performance was shaky. Hours later, he was gone forever. December 3rd, 1976. Tommy Bolin opened for Jeff Beck in Miami. The performance was shaky. His hands, once so fluid, struggled to keep up. Back at the hotel later that night, he injected heroin and mixed it with alcohol and barbiturates. Hours later, he was gone. 25 years old. Another guitar hero taken too soon. The news shocked the music world. For fans, it felt like a cruel replay of Hendrix, Joplin, and Morrison, brilliant talents extinguished before their time. For those who knew him, it was devastating but not entirely surprising. Tommy had been spiraling for months, caught between rising fame and crushing pressure. On stage, he was fire. Off stage, Tommy lived a different story. Despite his rising fame, Tommy never married and had no children. His life was a whirlwind of tours, studio sessions, and parties that left little room for stability. Friends recall him as warm, funny, and generous, but also restless and easily drawn into the chaos of the 1970s rock scene. He had relationships, but nothing lasting enough to anchor him. Instead, his closest bonds remained with his family back in Sioux City, especially his younger brother Johnny Bolin, who later carried on the family's musical legacy. In many ways, Tommy's personal life reflected the same intensity as his music. Bright, passionate, but fleeting. Though his life ended, his sound never did, and it still inspires players today. Tommy Bolin's career was short, but his impact runs deep. Guitarists like, looking back, Tommy's tragedy wasn't only about drugs or bad choices, it was the collision of immense talent with impossible pressure. He was a small-town kid thrown into the world's biggest stages almost overnight. He was expected to replace giants like Joe Walsh and Ritchie Blackmore, while at the same time carving out his own voice. Every step forward brought greater expectations, and every mistake felt magnified. The music industry of the 1970s offered little support for young stars. Touring schedules were relentless, critics unforgiving, and drugs frighteningly easy to find. For Tommy, substances became both an escape and a trap. They dulled the pressure, but they also eroded the very gift that made him special. By the time he realized it, it was too late. Tommy Bolin's story is tragic because it was avoidable. With better guidance, stronger support, and less destructive surroundings, his career might have lasted decades. But it is also inspiring. In only a handful of years, he created music that still resonates half a century later. His fate reminds us of the cost of genius in a world that often burns its brightest talents too quickly. Like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison just a few years before him, Tommy became part of that tragic lineage of artists whose brilliance was matched only by the brevity of their lives. Together, they form a haunting reminder of how fragile greatness can be in the harsh spotlight of rock and roll.